And it's Dr. Pete again, and had a political science student ask me some questions about the current issue. There's like the executive orders popping out, and one recently came out about President Trump and enforcement of the rules and the laws and all that. One of them was the sanctuary cities and the executive order through the Attorney General to take money away or to refuse to give money to sanctuary states or cities. And so, to get to the heart of it is, I tell people, if you support federal government and you say, well, the federal government needs to be listened to, and it needs to laws need to be followed, and we are a society of laws, then it doesn't come down to I get to decide which ones I do. So if you're an elected official, you can't say, well, I support this, so I will enforce that, but I don't agree with that, so I'm the president, I won't enforce that. Well, that does happen from time to time. It happened a lot under President Obama. It's not a political statement, it's just a fact. He didn't like certain things, so he would just not enforce them. Or he would make regulations through the federal bureaucracy, like, for example, the war on coal. That is something that was done. The FCC had things, FDA. I mean, they just made law. And that's not the point of the executive branch. They don't make law. They make regulations how to run their departments, but they're not supposed to be making law. So now you're seeing a president come along and say, fine, since your person did this, then I'm going to do it. I'm going to use executive order. I'm going to start stripping all that out. Then the Congress is now starting to pass laws about internet protocols, and that was one that just came up in the news today. So, when we start looking at how these things work, I always go back to the whole thing. Remember, you may want something and you are willing to do whatever it takes to get there. The ends justify the means, but it also justifies the next person to do what they want. So, for example, there's a state representative who apparently does not know what federal law is. Federal law talks about sanctuary cities in essence, and that local officials do have to support it. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter that it wasn't enforced under Obama. That was one of the arguments. The fact is, it is a law, and now these places are suing. They say, well, we'll sue and do this. Well, great, but it doesn't matter because it's federal law. Now, if you want to, the question would be for me as a judge, why did you not sue about this 4 or 5 years ago? Oh, that's right, because your person was in charge. Okay, so that would be a political. This is all politics at this point, and that should upset most people to say, well, wait a second, someone's here illegally. Why is a government official sitting there supporting this? Why is it that they are not only illegal, but many of these cases, almost 90% of them, are criminal people who are illegal? And then it becomes even more like, why would you want to keep a criminal person here who is illegal in the country? I've just never effectively heard an argument that would justify that level. I don't know. I don't want to fill a word in because it's not going to be a pretty word, but it's just pretty ignorant would be a nice way of saying it, or some people would say stupid. It doesn't make sense. If someone is illegal and they're doing criminal activity, why would you want them to stay here? Why, as a government official, say state, local, whatever, would you sit there and challenge a federal law that says you have to do this? Now, you were okay with the law when it wasn't enforced, but now it's enforced, now you're not okay with it. It kind of goes back to being self-serving. Then it becomes, I think, a gentleman, I don't know his name, Fox News, I think it was Tucker. Yes, Fox News is biased. I get that, and I don't want to hear that response like, oh, it's biased, but the reason it caught my eye when I was reading like the websites that gather data, like they gather articles, what I liked about it, the thing said, what if Republicans acted like Democrats? And I thought that was a catchy title, so I read that. And the point he made was, what if Republicans said, well, we're not going to enforce certain laws, and we're like, for example, funding. I'm just not going to fund that. As president, I'm just not going to release the money. I don't like that topic, so I just don't do that. Or there's violence towards a certain group, and the president says, well, that's okay. The last president, he didn't do these things, so I'm not going to do these things. And so then it really becomes a scary question. Don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. When a president doesn't enforce the law, that becomes kind of a scary thing because it becomes selective enforcement. If you go back to George Washington, and I'll leave everyone with this thought, he was probably the most apolitical person out of all the politicians we've had. He made a point that his job is not to interpret laws, it is to enforce the laws of Congress. That's his job. He saw it that way. So at some point, people need to start reflecting on George Washington and saying, if you don't like the laws, change them. But if they're the laws and you're the president, then you enforce them. And that's probably the best thing I can leave you with. I think too often people sit there and say, well, that's my girl or boy, so it's okay. They don't sit back and say, well, maybe even if they're politically what I believe or ideologically, I need to be worried because what they do today will be used tomorrow. What they do to justify will be used to justify later. These are all scary things if you really think about it. I appreciate it and best of luck.